there is a transition from Tesla to go into an AI company. And I kind of want to pick your brain on a little bit about that and what other potential sort of partnerships we could see in the auto market. But maybe contextualize this sort of charging partnership that has come up with something like back in like the NUMI days, right? Or like some other times where automakers would come together to try and do an effort, like together. So NUMI was the old GM Toyota, right? GM Toyota partnership in California, which is Tesla's Fremont factory now. How does this partnership differ from those kinds of partnerships? Is it sort of an uncommon thing that has happened in the auto industry? Is it par for the course? Is it just the next iteration of how automakers will partner? Can you contextualize some of that for us?
I think this is quite different than a hardware collaboration, because I think even BMW and Toyota collaborated on their little rear-wheel drive sports car. I don't even know. It's the people are going to kill me. I benchmark cars all day, but I forget what it is. But like you open the hood and everything says BMW, even though it's a Toyota Supra, everything under the hood. And the NUMI days, whether as a Pontiac Vibe or the Toyota Matrix. And I know a lot of people who drove those Pontiac Vibes and this is the best GM product I've ever had. And I said, yeah, it's because it's a Toyota. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, it's a Toyota Matrix. They didn't even know. And it's kind of funny. But so when you're trying to get scale, small cars were hard to make money on. So oftentimes you'd see collaborations on small cars or low volume cars. So that's why BMW and Toyota, they don't make very many of those Supras or that rear wheel drive, whatever BMW version. So it makes sense there, but this is different. This is infrastructure and it's the user experience that goes beyond the hardware of the vehicle. So it's hard to equate that to sharing a plant to build vehicles. And I would, if Tesla started licensing their powertrain and battery and selling that to other OEMs for them to build vehicles, that'd be more akin to like the NUMI plant. Like if you could buy a GM product that was built on a Tesla platform, similar to how GM and Honda are collaborating. I think Honda has a mid-size SUV, a BEV in the works. It's going to be built on the GM Ultium platform because Honda and GM are kind of working together a little bit. That more mirrors that. So I think if this is a little different, that's what I'm saying. It's just, it seems different.
I see. Yeah. What's the likelihood that the drivetrain and battery partnerships do start to take hold now that a sort of a door has been opened with the charging partnership between Ford and Tesla? Like, what do you think we're entering a stage now where now that we've sort of have open cooperation for the next generation of vehicles, could that be a signal that says that this is the first thing of many, drivetrains, batteries, full self-driving software? How do you think about that? Is it really that big of a deal, or do you think this is just an island of many islands that are going to appear?
I think the biggest deal is software. So Elon mentioned, I think Elon or Jim Farley mentioned this in their conversation, that Elon wanted to equate his software to Android, Android, and how Android now is on all phones that aren't Apple. So you have Apple, you have Android. That would be game changing. And I think there's other OEMs, some startups, like Rivian has a really good user interface and they're improving it really, really often. So we have a Rivian. We've seen what the user interface with the software is like early on, but now it's competitive. But there's other vestigial OEMs that I think are really far behind, and they're just now abandoning Apple CarPlay and they're trying to get in their own space. But there's been historic failures in the past of internally developed software systems for automobiles. And this is way more complicated than Ford Sync of the past, which had problems. And even there was a Cadillac, I forget, Cadillac had their own software system, I think a decade ago. It was a huge failure. And now there's Android Auto and BlackBerry. There's these other software providers that are providing these software ecosystems for cars for these totally connected vehicles that will be competing with Tesla. If Tesla is willing to license their total vehicle architecture software, that could also be another large source of income for Tesla that doesn't actually have a large physical cost. You're not manufacturing batteries and taking away critical resources that you need for your batteries. Now you're selling your software, which essentially exists out in the ether. You have to have engineers to help apply that or execute that with another OEM. But software is a much higher margin market because it's so hard to identify or benchmark the true cost of software. It's something we get asked at Monroe all the time. Hey, what does it cost to develop the software for this? And it's like, it's very difficult because the more elegant the solution, the easier it was. But actually, the brain power behind an elegant solution is harder to find. So oftentimes, really complicated, expensive looking things are actually bad solutions from a software perspective. And it's very hard to benchmark what a good software solution is.
And is that because there are individual contributors that can have an outsized impact, basically, because it's code, right? That's basically most of the lift. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like from the standpoint of, say, a Tesla or whoever decides to, do their own version of, I'm going to say Apple CarPlay, but it's not really Apple CarPlay. It's an OS. It's a vehicle OS of sorts that's going to run the infotainment and whatever else needs to run. How much of a lift there needs to be from that provider? In this case, let's just assume it's Tesla, and they decide to put, the Tesla OS or the in-car OS into every other automaker. Is there, do they have to partner with every single, supplier of the components that the software is going to manage, or is it much simpler than that? Is it just like the computer and the chip that runs the software, and then how it talks to the different components of the car are more standardized? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it starts with higher level decisions at an organization, and it comes down to the hardware that is selected to run the vehicle and what software is locked to those pieces of hardware. So I've talked at length with several experts in this field. One of them works at a company called Wipro. His name is Thomas Mueller. He is like a genius when it comes to this, and he explained a lot of how this works. So older vehicles, the way they were sourced is you have like a liftgate module that controls your liftgate in a minivan or an SUV. Oftentimes the control of that, if it has features like if it stops for your garage height, if it has sensors, that'll be locked on a piece of hardware, a module. So you have a module for that the supplier of the liftgate mechanism and whatnot will want to sell as a package. And that doesn't talk to the rest of the car. And then you'll have other features throughout the car, whether that's glove box release or door control, that are hardware and software locked to different suppliers. And then you have to have all of these separate pieces of hardware and software talk to the body controller, and then it gets super complicated. And that's why when we started to tear down vehicles, we've seen 35, 45, 55, 60, 70 separate modules, electrical modules on vehicles, and then you'd see half as many on Tesla. And during Investor Day, Tesla talked about taking control of all of their modules. And I think it was 85% of the Cybertruck will be under the control of Tesla, and then their new platform will be 100%. So you can't just take an OEM and say, we want to use Tesla's software, because you'll have all of these locked hardware, software barriers of sourced components. So it comes down to how you sourced your features and whether or not you've locked into some sort of essentially software encrypted wall where that OEM, that tier one, is motivated of selling this bespoke feature set with a module and a liftgate. That's like the one example that I can think of, is some sort of feature set that you get from some supplier. Tesla's essentially taking control of all their modules and all their software, and then they're able to update, control, monitor, and improve the user experience of everything in the vehicle because they have control of everything in the vehicle. So you have to start making decisions now on your next generation platform to even enable your vehicle to be able to accept a software package that mimics how Tesla operates and updates their vehicle. And I can't actually speak to the level of control like a Model 3 or Model Y has, because I think even Tesla has been making some decisions that are old school with, different features of the vehicle. And that's not an area of expertise for me, but this is how it was explained to me from this guy named Thomas. I've actually referenced Thomas's name like on 5 different interviews because I got to give him credit. He was so intelligent in understanding how all these systems work together. So it was really, we have great partners that we talk to kind of understand these things.
That's fascinating. So as an example, so I have a Tesla Model Y. So when I, how you can do and different cars have this too, but how you can put in your profile, like I have my seat in a specific position, and I have my steering wheel in a specific position, and some cars can do the pedals as well. So me hitting my name on the infotainment screen, then there has to be a partnership, or you have to internalize bring that module internally so that the screen can talk to the chair, the steering wheel, and the pedals, so that they can, when I hit the screen, they all move in tandem, right? Is that a good?
Yeah, that's great. So like in my vehicle and every vehicle I've had in the last decade, all that control is on the door. Like I have the settings 1, 2, 3, and you set everything, steering wheel, mirrors, seat, and you set it driver 1, driver 2, and you can set it to a key fob. And I have over-the-air updates, but I'm not sure. I don't know if General Motors, because I drive a GM product, can actually interface with the software that interfaces with that. Like that may be where it stops. I don't know. And in the past, that may have been all locked with the seat controller, or maybe the body controller. I don't have enough insight, but exactly correct. That's another set of features that maybe Tesla has more control over because they make their own seats. That's a really good point. But I know their door modules, I believe they're supplied by a supplier, the door modules, which would maybe control the mirror, your mirror, because it's steering wheel, which is a different supplier as well. So multiple suppliers talking together that could be controlled by the OEM, maybe not. And it's just, you have to think through every feature of the car that you want to be controlled by the software and make sure that it's open enough for your ecosystem to control it.
Got it. And so how much of a signal could it be that, with Tesla saying that they're going to bring all these modules basically 100% in-house, or control 100% of the modules with the compact car, how much of a signal is that says they might be willing to license or sell that infotainment sort of OS, and then they also provide you the modules, whatever those are, as an automaker, so that you can basically they become a tier 1 supplier, or whatever that would be, sort of labeled in that sort of thing. They become a supplier, and you get the OS and you get all the modules, and then all of a sudden you might have a GM or a Ford or a Honda that, as long as they're purchasing that entire thing from Tesla, they're able to basically provide the same level of infotainment and how you interface with the car internally. Do you think that's a signal that says Tesla might be willing to do that?
I think software for sure, but the hardware is harder for me to envision in the near term. But if Tesla ended up selling the hardware and the software for the for the ecosystem of the vehicle, for the software ecosystem of the vehicle, all that does is push Tesla's advantage even further, because then now they are selling something that's essentially free to them. So their vehicles, they're not going to pay themselves a huge software fee. They've already developed. It'll just be amortized over, So they're getting it for free. And if they're charging another OEM $300 or $1,000 per car, that means they're that much more advantaged from a cost perspective for their future vehicle. And then if they're selling the hardware with a markup, the markup on the hardware is even further advantage that Tesla has over every other OEM that is either buying it from Tesla or another supplier. So the more internalization of either software or hardware that Tesla does, it brings a cost advantage. And that goes, you don't have to be have to have a master's in economics to understand that if you do something yourself, you're not paying a supplier a markup. You're not paying the shipping if you're building your seat in the plant. Like, so when I was in Giga Berlin, I'm walking down the seat line and there's this guy literally wrapping the seat, and I'm like, normally that's done in other countries, like, because you want to outsource this hard manual labor. And I looked at Sandy and I said, I sure hope he's not doing that every day. My hands would be killing. He goes, oh no, he probably does that for 10 minutes and then rotates to doing the clips on the back. So we were watching this and it was wild to me that they were building the seats right there, right next to final assembly. Like, final assembly was right on the other aisle. They were decking batteries and cradles and chassis. So it's every time you see that internalization and that vertical integration, it's just more profit margin that Tesla can realize.
And I mean, that's certainly one of the things that we've experienced. The legacy automotive European companies have struggled with, because they can make really good cars. They can do really good suspension and steering and body, all that stuff they can do really well. But it's the software that is always the problem. I mean, the early Volkswagen, the ID.3 that a neighbor of mine has, all the problems were software. The car was perfect. There was nothing wrong mechanically with it. It was the software that messed up quite often, and the charging was a problem.
Yes. If I explain to the listeners how crazy our software system is and why it's so difficult for legacy car companies to get software right, I'll do it very quickly.
Yeah.
So to save probably $500 a vehicle, or let's say 350 quid a vehicle.
Yeah.
We farmed out all the modules that control the vehicles to our suppliers because we could bid them against each other. So Bosch would do the body control module, someone else would do the seat control module, someone else would do the engine control module.
Right.
And we'd have about 150 of these modules of semiconductors all through the car. The problem is the software are all written by 150 different companies, and they don't talk to each other.
Right.
And so even though it says Ford on the front,
yeah,
I actually have to go to Bosch to get permission to change their seat control software.
Right.
So
Wow.
even if I had a high-speed modem in the vehicle and I had the ability to write their software, it's actually their IP. And I have 150, we call it the loose confederation of software providers, 150 completely different software programming languages. All the structure of the software is different. It's millions of code, and we can't even understand it all. So, that's why at Ford, we've decided in the second generation product to completely insource the electric architecture.
Right.
And to do that, you need to write all the software yourself. But just remember, car companies haven't written software like this.
Yeah.
Ever. They've never written software. So we're literally writing how the vehicle operates, the software to operate the vehicle for the first time ever.